And just to piggyback on what you said is always ask the question, what's the cost of not doing it, right? What's that risk, right? What's that impact, right? As long
Right.
as you tell that story, which they understand, right? Whether it's a developer, whether it's a business leader, whether it's your CFO or whether it's your CEO, right? At the end of the day, if like I'm a CIO, my job is to develop that value proposition within my peers who are C levels, right? Or even to the board. So that's one of the things which I really do is I always tell people I'm not running a technology department. I always say I'm running IT as a business, right? That's the difference. I think this statement is so powerful. Run your IT department as you're running a true business, right? How are you enabling the business to run better with your IT practices, right? Whether it's your IT, whether it's your cybersecurity, how are you keeping your company safe? How are you making sure that all your end users are safe and not attacked by any of the hackers?
Hello and welcome to Secrets of AppSec Champions. My name is Chris Lindsay, and today we are talking with Jigar Shah. The conversation is going to be around security champion programs. Jigar is an executive global leader in the IT, identity access, and application security space. Jigar, please introduce yourself.
Hey, Chris, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this. This is super exciting and, of course, always a pleasure and honor to chat with you. Really excited about our conversation. So, thank you once again for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Jigar Shah. As Chris mentioned, I am very passionate about technology, business, security, and the things around us which keeps us safe. So really looking forward to having this amazing conversation with Chris today on building a security champions program in your company and how we can leverage security not just as a separate entity but as a part of our day-to-day life. So really looking forward to that.
Very good. All right. So Jigar, let's talk about building an application security champion program. What does it take to stand one up?
That's a great question. Though it's simple, it's a complex endeavor, to really achieve. So my first thing, Chris, when I talk to anyone in the company, my first question I pose to them is, whose responsibility is to keep the environment, organization safe and secure? That's my first question, right? I have, in my experience, I have gotten various responses from different people. Someone says, "Oh, it's security team who has to who is responsible for security." Sometimes it says security, compliance, and legal. Sometimes they talk about, "Oh yeah, we do bits and pieces of this." So, in short, my first conversation start with that, and then I tell them that security is everyone's responsibility. Period,
Absolutely.
right? And that's exactly, that's where I think you start building that security culture within any organization you go with. And I always believe technology and business, they're all driven by a culture from a leadership, how you really drive that culture and how it trickles down. And that culture not only reflects your internal organization but to your external customers and your end users. So I think that's super important, and that's why I think this particular topic today which we are going to chat about is security champions is more about, it's a philosophy, it's a culture, it's a framework which we really have to build within any company as leaders. So my first thing, as you asked, what it takes to build a security champion is, number one, first of all, getting everyone on the same page that security is everyone's responsibility, and then trying to get those folks, within your side, so who are non-security team members, right? Different members within your IT cross-functional teams, for example, application development team, right? Your infrastructure team, your product team, maybe your marketing, finance, and HR, who are a corporate business partners, right? Because those are the folks who will be attacked when something bad happens, right? Because they can be vulnerable, right? They don't know, and then they can get into this whole idea of getting sucked into this threat actor or a bad actor. So for me, it's getting the right stakeholders, right? To bring them in a room and talk about what is the objective and the goal you're trying to achieve of the Security Champions program. So if you really ask me, and of course we'll talk about the entire thought process, but in one line, I think it's getting the right folks who you think are your spokespeople, who are non-security. Maybe they are sometimes non-technical, but they really are passionate about, security in general. Getting them, getting to be their spokesperson and developing them over time to really have, your voice out in the company to really create that culture of security. That's what it
Right.
takes to create a security champions.
I love how you talk about culture because so many people that I've talked to about, building a program, they're like, all right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reach out and talk to the developers and we're going to have one. And those are destined to fail. And everything you brought up is absolutely in line. When you start looking at making sure the executives are on board, where the executives understand what the program is. Because when you don't have that executive buy in and you're reaching out to the developers saying, hey, you've got your security champion, and then you have your developers. And when that resource, that security champion is split, some companies are split between developer and running the champion role. Sometimes the executives go, you know what, we're behind, on the deadline. We need them to be programming. Forget the security. It can go away. And so, what you're talking about, right? The culture, making sure everybody's on the same page, making sure that the executives know what this is about, all the way down to the security team, the management, the champion, and the developers is absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
Absolutely critical.
Totally. I think gaining that executive support is the key. I think half the battle is won that way, right? When your executive or your leaders in your company are bought into this whole philosophy, right? The whole idea of creating a security champions, they will themselves become a champion in a way to create a champion within their teams, right? And I think that's a very, very powerful statement to really make sure that make your executives to be the champion, to create a champion from their team. I think that's where the success lies. That's what the key is. But yeah, I think after once you get that executive, support, I think identify and select those security champions, right? So how do you do that, right? So I think as a leader, you need to be very clear on defining the criteria, right? Develop a criteria for selecting the security champions, such as someone who is strong technically but still have a great communication skills, understand the security, the importance of security, right? So those folks who are, and I always tell people, security champions don't have to be a pro in a security, right? They don't have to be security experts, but they need to understand the importance of security, that they can convey that to their respective teams, right? So you develop those criteria, and maybe in some cases I've done in past is I've also done a nomination process, right? Reach out, to my peers or different, leaders. Hey, would you nominate from your team, right? So there are different ways people can go about it, but that's how, you, or even you can ask for volunteers, right? Some people are just interested and they volunteer. Hey, I would love to be the security champion, right? So at the end of the day, you bring those right folks into your mix, and I think that's where,
Right.
you select those security champions to begin with, right?
So that's a great point. So one thing that I did that worked pretty well for me when I was setting up a program was I asked for volunteers. And I because some of the guys who really want to learn and know more about security, just, how do I get into security? I want to be more secure. I want to learn. And volunteering, those are your really good assets, because when I ran my program, that was something that worked well for me. When the people said, I want to be part of the champion program, those guys are very vested and really have the drive and desire to be a champion. And with what you suggested too, asking the leaders, hey, who'd you recommend? A nomination process is also excellent, because when you're going to the resource and you're talking to them and you say, hey, you were recommended by multiple peers on your team or within the company. We would love to extend this idea or this offer to you to be on the security champion, to be a security champion. What do you think? That buys the bill, the desire from their side. Hey, if someone were to come to me and say, hey, we would love for you to do X, Y, and Z, I'd feel great about doing it. It wouldn't be I'm being told or I'm being pushed into something I don't want to do. It's more of a, hey, that's great. I'm being nominated or recommended by peers who have the trust in me to do this job or this position.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the things which really worked for me in the past is, if I really have to bring in someone, as a matter of fact, Chris, I read this book which was really like, was really good in my career, which really shaped, my thinking, was Influencing Without Authority, right? That's actually a beautiful book. If you get a chance, definitely, I would highly recommend, because most of the time in our careers, sometimes we don't have a specific title, but we are still putting into those leading roles where people don't pretty much reporting to us, like from the HR standpoint, but still, you are responsible because you need them to do your work as well as, for the project work. So how do you become more effective? And I think that's where I really took, some of those lessons from that book. And I started, influencing without authority, right? And in that case, what I did was, first I started having those cross-functional meetings with their leaders, bringing those teams in, and just I would say basically making them socially aware about cybersecurity, right? So slowly and slowly I started getting those interests from people who were really just interested in understanding what's happening out here. And cybersecurity is right now such a field which is not, foreign to anyone, because there are so many things, even people who are not working in the space, they still know what that means, right? At least at a high level. So here you're talking to people who are already in the industry, so the job becomes a little bit even easier. The second thing is, you need to start, bringing, the leaders into the fold and telling them that, hey, if you don't do this, what are the implications? How does it impact them, right? So once you start telling that story and the data points, you give them a line of sight that, hey, even though this is not, my job responsibility when I join the organization, or this is, maybe I'm an application developer, but so that is not in my job duties to really go and, become a security champion. But I still want to become a security champion. Why? Because indirectly it affects me, right? So that particular portion, you really have to make sure that you make it clear to them, in whatever the situation you are there. And the last thing is, you make bring them into your day to day, maybe even weekly updates and things like that, where they really see that, how the security programs are run, and, what are those things which are affecting, the rest of the company, right? So that they directly see how things are moving. I think once you give them that line of sight, be transparent, right? And we tell them that, hey, this is what is expected from you, and we are there to train you, right? It's not that we're asking you to like be, hey, just come with all the knowledge. Here we just need that, hey, you are the champion, you can influence your team. So you're looking for, I always say, people in this whole social media world, we need those security influencers, right? Quote unquote, right? And so I think the new name I've come up with is not security champions, more than, hey, you are the security influencers, right? And I really like this term because people can relate to it. And rather than, making sure that, hey, I'm the champion of this and I need to know XYZ, no, you just need to influence people, to do this, right? And I think that the whole mindset changes. So that's how I would go.
You bring up a good point, because sometimes, and I've seen this too, where somebody is, hey, I'm the champion, I'm in charge of security for these projects, you're going to listen to me because I'm the utmost authority, and they, and they bring down the hammer, and they alienate the developers again with the security team, and it becomes problematic. Whereas I love your word influencer, because that's really what they're doing, is they're influencing good security practices down at the development level. teaching developers, hey, here's what I've learned from the security guys. Here's what I've learned on my journey. Let's take this and help apply it to your code base and make it better as one and make everything much better.
Totally. I completely agree with you. I think that's where the key is. A lot of people try to enforce things, and I think that's where I think it doesn't work. Because ultimately, look, like, how security plays a role, right? Security is something which people see sometimes as a hindrance, right, to their work, as an obstacle, right? If you really ask, someone as an end user, why would I have to go through these steps when I can just do it, right? So in order for you to be successful, you need to be creative. You need to be a creative thinker. And I always say, being a CISO or being a CIO, you have to have that empathy. Is so important. I think most of us, including sometimes me, we lack, that empathy. And if you don't understand as a leader what empathy means, or what how does it work, you are never going to be successful, whether it's any program in AppSec, or, as a matter of fact, any IT initiative, right? At the end of the day, it's all about people, right? How are you impacting their lives, right, as an end users, and what kind of business outcome you're bringing back, how you're making sure the technology is enabling you to do that. So I feel that empathy is so important. Once you understand that, how you can make these folks who are non-security folks bought into your vision and bought into your strategy, that's when they will really become your true person, or a true influencer outside security, and really build that whole security culture, which I talked about earlier.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've heard a lot of the security teams say, I don't have a developer on the security team because I can't hire one, I can't find one. And the beautiful thing about having a security champion or influencer program is that now you're actually bringing somebody internally into the fold, and you're promoting them into the security area. And so many people who don't understand security, this gives them that opportunity to learn, to grow, to be better. And over the years of my development, writing software, one of the biggest things that I always wanted to do was be better. And early on, I saw back in early 2000, databases were the future. Databases is where things were, you're going to need to know databases inside and out. And because of that, I took a job only working in the database area, writing store procedures, writing and creating tables, and all things database, which then propelled and just made things better, down the road for me in my career. And I was able to take what I learned and apply it and help others, and just, it paid dividends. And that's the same thing you're doing with the security program, the influencer program. You're taking somebody, helping grow this person, be it if they volunteer or through the committee, hey, you've been recommended, and taking them to that next level of understanding of security. How many times do we hear, hey, I just got another email, this company X has just been compromised and my information was in there? Or how many times have you heard, hey, data has been stolen and is on the dark web? And you're asking yourself, how did this happen?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, Chris. I think we are living in this world which is highly digital, which is highly interconnected. Imagine those threat actors or bad actors moving freely, right? Having our personal information, right? And they can use it in any way they want. How would we feel, right? That, hey, we feel that, someone has really come into our house, really understanding what's going on. And I think that's why I said security is not foreign to most of the people anymore, right? Though they everyone, even if you ask, who's a non-technical, non-security person, even walking off the street, I bet you they would know what identity theft means, hey, how what security is, or they know the word I got hacked kind of thing, right? So I think it's not that foreign anymore. People are becoming very aware, and our jobs as leaders is to make sure that the companies or the organizations we work for, we develop that culture, for the people, so that it says that it all starts from the home, right? Once you start, it just starts developing, huge and big. So to that point, I think it brings into my two next steps, which you mentioned, Chris, earlier, was how do you now, once you get the champions or influencers, what do you do with them, And I think the organic step is number two, defining the right roles and responsibilities, right? And then providing them the training and resources. So that whole responsibilities is very important. Sometimes, people start a security championship program with a big bang, but then they fail to really draw that racy chart, right? That whole responsibility. Hey, I'm a non-security person, for example. If I'm coming to your team, what do you really expect me to do, right? So those things, as a leader, we have to make it super clear that, hey, person X, you are a security champion, and this is what, we will equip you with the right amount of training or education or resources, which you can take it back to your team, right? And then, go disseminate that or cascade that more information or be that gatekeeper, right? So for example, developers, right? Let's say we talk an example of application developers. you know People say, hey, security, we don't do all of this, or we don't do this, right? Can we just bring security shift left, right? Can we bring security in the beginning, right? When they are doing some design sessions, right? That's what is called as threat modeling, right? That if we really want to make sure that security is involved during that time, that initial design sessions, or maybe even during the initial requirements gathering, we really need that security spokesperson to really bring that security view when the product and the marketing team are coming up with new initiatives, right? So that's something I would say as an example. You can use security champions, to really be your spokesperson. Be out there to really call these things out, those nitty gritties. That, hey, this is how we can do. If you're writing a code, let's do another round of review from the security perspective. So even before it is further developed and progresses into the whole SDLC cycle, I'm still there to really, make sure the security is inbuilt into that.
Right, right. Well, and you bring up a good point. I have talked to others who tried to start a security program, an influencer champion program, and the problem was the security team. We're too busy for this. Well, the problem is you know when you bring somebody in, hey, guess what? You're going to be part of the security thing. Hey, you know what? Go learn it on your own. You're on your own. You're destined for failure. You'll never get off the ground. And what you said was spot on. When I bring you into the champion program or into the security group, with the dotted line or however it's done in your environment, you're now one of us. You're going to be invited to our daily stand up or weekly stand up. You're going to know what we're working on. You're going to know that, hey, here's what we're trying to do. We're looking at new tools to do X, Y, and Z. Do you have any thoughts? Now you start bringing them in. And when they're actually vested and know and feel like they're part of the team, they know what's going on. They can take that and relay it back down to the developers. Hey, here's what the security team's working on. Here's what they're thinking about. Here's what they're doing. One of the things that I always did when we ever did any penetration testing internally, we always recorded the results. And we did that through a video. And we took that information, we sat down with the manager and the software architect and said, here's our finding, here's how we did it, here's what happened. When you have that transparency, it goes a long way to making sure that it can be fixed. And having that influencer, that champion, that's what they're doing. They're able to go in, they're when they have some downtime, they can be focused on taking a look. Hey, what I'm going to work on this week or this month is going to be SQL injection month or command injection month. And they can pick 2 or 3 topics and start really looking through all the findings in the tools or within the code and trying to take the most critical things like a command injection and is this real? Is this something that can happen? And you can start building that hey, here's what needs to be attended to. Let's put this in the next sprint. Or, oh my gosh, we just found something really bad. Let's go ahead and get a hot fix out there. And when they're intertwined that closely with the developers and with the software architects and management, all of a sudden it makes it easy. It's an easy conversation. Hey, here's a finding. It's critical. This is why it's critical.
Hmm.
Can we address it either now because it's a hot fix, or maybe it's let's put it in the next release?
Right. Or, if definitely, and just to piggyback on what you said is always ask the question, what's the cost of not doing it, right? What's that risk, right? What's that impact, right? As long as you tell that story, which they understand, right? Whether it's a developer, whether it's a business leader, whether it's your CFO, or whether it's your CEO, right? At the end of the day, if like I'm a CIO, my job is to develop that value proposition within my peers who are C levels, right? Or even to the board. So that's one of the things which I really really do is I always tell people I'm not running a technology department. I always say I'm running IT as a business, right? That's the difference. And this is where I think this statement is so powerful. Run your IT department as you're running a true business, right? How are you enabling the business to run better with your IT practices, right? Whether it's your IT, whether it's your cybersecurity, how are you keeping your company safe? How are you making sure that all your end users are safe and not attacked by any of the hackers, right?
Right. Well, and you bring up several good points. Think about it this way. All right. So people will usually look at security as it's a cost center, it's costing me money, it's not gaining me or growing me any money. And you really you hit the nail on the head when you said, what is it going to cost if we have a breach or data loss? What is this going to cost if we have PHI that gets released?
Totally, absolutely. And Chris, you hit the nail right there too, right? That's when you keep these leaders thinking, right? Because now you're talking their language, right? Now you're talking a CFO language. Hey, if you don't do this, you're gonna maybe lose X amount of money. The revenues might go down, or the profits might not be there. Instead of seeing IT and cybersecurity as a cost, I would rather. So what I did was I turned into an investment center, from a cost center to an investment center. And when you do that as a leader, that's when you really see and how the whole culture changes, right? You make sure that you break down the silos. That's another thing. I really, really, because what happens is security is into one area, development is in another area, and they both are running and they both have this constant friction. My thing is, even physical silos I don't want. I want developers and security to sit together, right? Break all those barriers, break all those silos. As a result, you're a part of one team. You're a part of IT at the end of the day. To me, you're a part of the information security, or whatever you want to call information technology department or a program, right? I think that's where you start gaining as a leader, and that respect which you need, from your entire team. That hey, now you are giving them a line of sight of what is the cost of not doing it, what is the impact of not doing it, what is the risk of not doing it.
Right. Right. Now, one thing that, and I've worked with a lot of companies helping them build their programs through my previous roles. One of the things that I usually talk about is finding a way to incentivize this role. And multiple options. One being, if you're dispersed, right? You have multiple locations spread across the United States. Bring everybody together in one location, one room for a week, and that helps take the influencers or champions and make them, hey, you are part of the security team because we're all here together for a week. Bringing them together helps build that unity. It gives them a feeling of, hey, I get to travel, because a lot of developers rarely get to travel.
Right.
The other thing that I've talked with others is create a bonus or incentivize through a slight increase in salary. And a company that I worked with before had 15 to 20 developers that were going to be part of their champion program. I suggested, hey, between this amount and this amount. And the pushback was, well, that's going to add up to X amount of money. And I said, look at it this way: what would it cost to pay a full-time employee to do
Sure.
this job?
And more than that, what will be the cost if you don't do this?
Exactly, exactly. So you were talking less than one FTE, and now you have 15 to 20 security guys versus just the one.
Absolutely.
So you have much better reach and
I
everything.
think you
And
bring
so,
up a really good point. I think reward and recognition is so important because here you're asking someone who doesn't have that responsibility, but you're still expecting that person to do something out of what they are supposed to do, right? And I think that's the best part is getting them rewarded, right? Sometimes a public recognition, sometimes bringing them into your all hands meeting or your town halls where you really like felicitate them, right? Really bring them, give them that whole the grant, whatever feedback you have to give them. That way you were really pushing them to do their best, in this program. And that would really go far along because most of the time, sometimes I feel that, different things get, people motivated by different things, right? So some are financially motivated, some are appreciation motivated, some are feedback motivated, right? So you really need to understand who is who, right? And accordingly, you need to tailor your rewards and recognition program to bring them, and then start measuring and tracking that progress, right? So that's another thing. How do you know that your program is working well? You know, how do you really track that? And that's where I think you need to define those metrics, those KPIs, where you really see the before and the after picture. You see if for example, code reviews, right? Hey, before code reviews, I had XYZ vulnerabilities when I did my scan, or I had this many false positives and things like that. Now with the code review, with the design sessions, I've reduced by X%. And I think
right.
that's what talks about your real progress, right? Your real
Yeah.
success.
So one thing that's an interesting concept, or not interesting concept, but something that is interesting that I see in some programs. So when you're a larger company, you may have a lot of different teams. Some companies that I've worked with have over 85 plus teams. And what's interesting is you may have a successful security program, but one of the things that you always have is that one team that will not do the security stuff that, hey, guess what? We have a finding. We don't care. We got to get this out the door. Hey, you have some very critical things. We don't care. We've got to get out the door. How do we work with those teams?
Yeah, again, going back, to again the fundamentals, right? At the end of the day, you have this many findings, and if you don't paint that right risk picture to them, they will never get it, right? So as a leader, you have to talk, and sometimes it even talks from the top, right? It doesn't come from the bottom, right? Sometimes it has to be coming from the top. And that's why I talked about culture at the very beginning of our discussion. Because if you put a product out, right, in a rush that, hey, I have to put this out without really making sure that it is secure and safe, no matter what industry you are in, either you will end up recalling that product, you will end up maybe getting into a lawsuit or a legal implications, or you may end up into a loss of, your reputation, or loss of finances, or any of those things, right? So most of the people don't understand because their job is to just, hey, kick their programs out. But then as a leader, if I'm a CIO, or if I'm a CISO, or if I'm an executive leader in a company, my job is to educate my peers, my leaders. Hey guys, you cannot do this because of XYZ reason. So as long as you do that, and then you talk about the whole risk analysis, right? Hey, how much risk are you willing to accept? Right? And then the conversations come to that point, from a leadership, that, hey, if you're willing to accept that risk, then yes, why don't you sign off on this, right? Kind of thing. So you start holding people accountable, right? In a better way, right? Not in a bad way, but in a good way. That, hey guys, I think accountability and outcomes are the two main things which I have kept it within my team. So you make them accountable, not only just within your team, but even cross functionally. That, hey, now if you do this, you're accountable for XYZ. If you do this, this is the outcome, right? So once you start painting that picture, and if you're a good storyteller, right, with the right data and facts and figures, I think everyone understands the gist, right? And if they don't, then you got a problem, right? Then you really have to have an honest discussion with your teams. But I think most of the time it's just a matter of bringing that line of sight, talking about in the risk terms, talking about in the business outcome terms, and then telling people, what if you don't do this? I think those are some of the key.
No, that's spot on. It's funny how many conversations I've had, and it's, hey, there's just one team, and so you're right. It's, sometimes you just got to elevate and bring it up to the executives and say, look, we've done everything we can.
Mhm.
Your problem, and see what they can do.
Right.
So awesome. Well, there's been a lot of different aspects we've talked about, champion and or influencer programs. Is there anything else that you would want to throw in there or discuss related to running a program, working on a program, anything program related?
No,
Here's your chance.
I'm very, very honored to be, featuring here and, talking to you. You yourself are a wealth of experience and knowledge. And, this is a great forum, great platform where you're bringing leaders, someone like me to really understand, the security as well as IT in that detail. And, you're doing great job for the community, especially people who are in the similar jobs, to really understand and know from my learnings, right? At least I can share my 2 cents, what went right and what went wrong. So I really appreciate, you bringing me over. This is great. I would just leave with one thought, to all the viewers and audience here, that make sure as a leader you say to everyone that security is everyone's responsibility and not just one team's responsibility. If you develop that culture, I think no matter wherever you go, you are going to get the success in your organization.
Well said. I don't think I can add any more to that. I can't say it any better. Jigar, thank you for today, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Secrets of AppSec Champions. If you found today's information valuable, hit that subscribe button on your Apple Podcast, your Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's episode. Ratings and reviews are like gold for us, so if you're feeling generous, please leave us a kind word as it helps others find our show. Until next time, take care.